Hi all, thank you for having me. I'm very excited. I brought my daughter along to New York, and it's my first time here, so we've done a lot of sightseeing. It was excellent. I'm totally jealous of you people living here. It's so cool. Well, that's enough of the small talk, because I have only 30 minutes, and I wasn't able to make any choices, so I have to rush through all my slides. So just hang in there or something, I don't know. I'm going to talk to you about the continuous culture, and why is the continuous culture, for me, such an exciting subject? Well, these are some stats from the State of the DevOps report, which is run by Puppet Labs, and they have run a research amongst 2,100 companies, and they compared large projects to small projects in the rate of success. And the rate of success is only 10% for large projects, and another 52% is challenged. So there's another 38% that never goes into production. I don't know if we recognize it. I have worked on a lot of projects that have never gone into production. Have you also? So that's terrible. It's a draining process to work on something that's never going to add any value to your project, right, to your company. And small projects have such a better success rate. It has a 74% success rate, which is crazy if you compare it to the 10%. And here's another one. There are a lot of unused features in our systems. This is also from the same report. You should definitely read into it. They say in large projects, there's a 64% of features that's not used. That's 2/3 of your code that's not used. And while it's sitting there, there are some people who think that unused code doesn't cost any money. That isn't true, right? It costs so much money, your only priority should be eliminating those things. I don't know if this is right. Is it my, oh, okay, great. I love other female speakers. They have the same issues as I have. Thank you. Okay. And in small deliveries, there's only a 14% of features that's not used. And this is not because those people are better at making assumptions. They screw up just as much as the people working on the large projects. Only they learn faster which ones to eliminate. And they actually do that. They eliminate the features that were experiments that just plain failed. And that's the most valuable thing you can do. The cheapest code to maintain is code that isn't there. So why are we so bad at making assumptions? And I would like to introduce you to the Kinetic Model. Is anyone familiar with the Kinetic Model already? Okay, that's very little hands. This is kind of the thing I think of every day. For me, it's very important. The Kinetic Model tells you something about complexity. And it says there's a relation between cause and effect. And in the simple quadrant over here, there are the easy problems. You have a cause and you have an effect. And you can actually see the cause causing the effect. So like, I spill some milk and there's a stain on my clothes. That's easy, right? You can just see it and you can observe it and you can act properly upon it. So you learn things as a kid already. A lot of problems are in the simple domain. Then there's the complicated quadrant, where you have some cause and some effect, and there's a complex relation between them. So you have a lot of parameters which are all kind of affecting the way the effect will be observable. And to be able to work in this quadrant, you have to be an expert. You have to have people who you can call analysts. We know those, right? And they can write 1,200 pages reports. And actually, at the end of the report, it will state the truth. And we think that software development is in that quadrant. It isn't. And it's the worst mistake you can make. Software development is in the complex quadrant, at least. Maybe in the chaotic. And in the complex quadrant, there is a cause and there is an effect. But we don't understand the relationship between it. So we do know they have some kind of relationship, but we aren't at the place where we can understand it. And the way to act when you are in that quadrant is to experiment, is to probe. So you have to find your way in learning what the relation is. This is why A/B testing, for instance, is so successful, because it's probing, it's learning about things. We are just bad at making assumptions. So the rest of the talk, I will introduce you to how to nurture an experimental culture, because that's a hard thing to do, and it's not just software development. So this is what it's about. To improve is to change, and being perfect is to change often. So all these little changes together, that will make you a high performer. And if you compare high-performing companies with lower-performing companies, they have a 200x time more frequent deployments. I think companies like Google are in that quadrant, right? And they have more than 2,000x times shorter lead cycle times, which is insane, right? And they have this increased speed at an increased quality level. So they do make lesser errors, and they do recover faster from failures. So how do we get there? How do we deliver incremental change? It's in 8 lessons, so that's what I said. Well, actually, normally it's 10, so I tried to eliminate some, and I managed to eliminate 2, so I don't know, it's not enough. Okay, so first, be able to safely and sustainably deliver software. And obviously, this is continuous delivery. Who's doing continuous delivery already? Oh, that's super. I think it's kind of fallen beyond the hype cycle, and it's moving its way up to the slope of maturity or something, because a lot more people are doing it than when I asked this 2 years ago. I'm not going to go into continuous delivery. I think there has been a lot of things about this said. The one thing I'd want to stipulate is it's about delivering incremental change. So you can't have an experimental approach if you're not able to deliver incremental change. If your deployments cause a headache, and if it causes overtime, and if it causes everybody to panic, then you're not ready to go there. But this is only a baby step. This is the first thing you do, and then comes the rest. So what is continuous, actually? Well, naming seems to be still a problem in IT. Somehow, maybe we'll find our way to solve this. But continuous would actually say all the time. But it isn't all the time, of course. So what is continuous? If you look at many enterprises, they are really somewhere around every 100 days. And some companies are able to shift towards a daily release. With the companies I worked with, we were able to make this shift. We have a multiple day release, or multiple releases per day. That's just kind of different at this moment. And it does seem to get exponentially complex to accelerate more. So I have deep respect for companies like Etsy, who are way over there, because it's extremely complex to deliver that many times. So anyone knows what's the deployment record for number of deployments each day? Take a guess. 10,000. Oh, wow. This is the first time somebody names a number that's actually bigger than the actual number. So, congrats, that's cool. It's 7,448. That's once every 11.2 seconds. So you have to do really a lot to be able to run this fast, because at the companies I work with, the test sets will already take you about 2 hours because they are so big. So to be able to deliver every 11 seconds, you have to do a lot of work over there. But still, it's worth nothing. If you're not able to actually define something that is of value, which is small. So if you have a product which is this big, and you can just deliver it in little particles, but you won't release it actually to users until you have the full stack of features developed, then it's worth nothing that you delivered it incrementally, right? It's only worth something if you actually start using it. And this is where product development comes in. So you're only as small as your MVP, and as agile as your roadmap. And this is what we're facing in companies. We have kind of product development roadmaps which are lasting a year. When I started in November, in January at the company, they had this roadmap. They already told users they were getting new features in 8 months. So that's terrible. This was 8 months ago, but it was actually a pronouncement like, okay, we're going to deliver this at the end of the year. And you are neglecting that you are learning on your way. So every lesson you learn is worthless because you can't adjust your plans. You already told all your users what you're going to do. So that's terrible. Stop doing that. And also stop red sprints, because this is draining energy from the team. You make estimates, and time after time, sprint after sprint, you end up with this anti-pattern where you somehow have some features left and no time left. So why bother? If you just focus on making things as small as possible, and you put your KPIs on the number of things you are able to push to production, then that's an incentive for the team to make things as small as they can. And that's the behavior we want. Because small means less risk. We just saw that. So you can just stop estimating and say, okay, you get rewarded on the number of issues you are able to put into production. And then the team starts asking, do you mean that if we break this one in 3 little particles, we get 3 points, which is 3 times more than if we deliver it as 1? And we say yes. So they feel like it's kind of a trick question, but it isn't. This is the point. So that's great. This is Jess Humble. He's used to be from ThoughtWorks. And he says, if you have 4 measurements to measure any team, then you should use these ones. You should look for lead time for changes and release frequency, which is about tempo. And you should look at time to restore service and change fail rate, which is about quality. And better teams do better at both. They increase speed while increasing quality. And that's the thing to reach. That's cool. So how do we do it? We have a simple quadrant, and we say, okay, whenever someone has an idea, we put it in this quadrant. And if something is a high effort and it has a low value, then we just say no. That's obvious. If something has a high value and it is a low effort, we simply say yes. That's the quick win. And then we have the other 2 quadrants, which are, there's a low effort and a low value. That's the maybe. So we try to decompose it, making the effort even lower until the point where it's worth our while. And we have the high value, high effort, and we do the same thing. We try to decompose it. So eliminate all the things that are not really affecting value, but are affecting the amount of effort. And then we have these weekly meetings where there's a portfolio board, and it's software development together with product development. And we say, okay, anyone can put in an idea, and if the idea is discussed, we say, okay, you have to break it down into little particles. Then it goes to research. Then we have maybe. So if something is an idea, but we don't have the priority for it, we say, okay, don't talk about it. We minimize the amount of effort going into code we are not building, because code we are not building is not valuable. And we put it into a parking lot, and we say, well, maybe, just don't talk about it. And then we have yes and yes, but later, and they go to the backlog, and they go to the parking lot for 2 months. And this is the way to very effectively only work on the things we are building and talk about the things we are building, because this meeting takes us 1 hour, and that's product development for us. Well, then remember, you're not the only one whose process is changing. So that's lesson number 3. You have to stand your ground. Auditing and compliance are used to doing major code reviews. And then you go there and you say, okay, I want to deliver every hour. And they say, okay, how am I going to do the code review? How am I going to have the huge documentation I always required? Sit down with them, have a good talk. They are very willing to come along with you if you do this. Take them seriously. And we had a nice talk, and they said, okay, if you do everything in version control, if you have test change approvals and force peer reviews, so we want to make sure that there's always a second pair of eyes watching code that goes into production. If you have the certainty that only green goes to production, so if your test is red, you don't go to production. Approvals in your workflow, and if you have conformity by design, then we're fine. We don't have to do any checks anymore. So that's great. It was a great outcome for us, because Jenkins does most of these things for us, right? So we didn't have to bother. Also, continuous security is a major change for your company, because also the security guys did a penetration test every quarter or something, and we had to change things around. Because security is a big issue, it can actually make your company non-existent. Sorry, I don't know a better word. Default or something. What we did was we said, okay, every month we're going to have a hacking session. We educated everybody how to hack our systems, and we made sure we had security issues every month. Because if it hurts, do it more often. And this was great for our awareness. So we learned about security flaws every month now because we were trying to hack ourselves. Also, we said, okay, anything that can be automated should be integrated in our pipelines. It's crazy to have known vulnerabilities on websites and to have script kiddies like this one over here, and you can just download a script and you can actually say what's the domain you want to attack and say launch, and then it goes. That's all you have to do. And it's crazy if your system is not robust against this. So make sure you have your automated scanners in your pipelines to make sure that you're not vulnerable for these easy kind of attacks. Then there's enough left. And make sure it's not about paper. So paperless or something, kind of a metaphor for serverless, because developers don't like paper. So make sure it's about code. Then it's fun. And then they actually start doing it voluntarily. That's a good place to be. And make sure you address some of the business anti-patterns. So they were used to having fallback plans, manual acceptance testing, education for users, user documentation, and communication about releases. You should stop doing those because you can't do those every 11 seconds. So try to change to something like canary releasing, where you have low impact when you make a mistake, co-creation on tests. Make sure they are already on board when you define your tests. Have walkthroughs, because they are very nice integrated within your system. Have embedded user assistants and chatbots, and look at release notes and how you can integrate them into your delivery pipeline. So right now, our developers are writing the release notes, which sounds horribly scary, but they are learning. And sometimes grammar shouldn't be an issue, I think. So yes, this is possible. Okay, number 4, reinvent HR management rules and procedures for autonomy. These rules are blocking autonomy. And management doesn't scale. So you have to do things very differently. This is one of our directors. And at a certain point, he said, okay, there are all these things changing and everybody's doing work, which was actually the point, delegating. And he said, I can't control what's happening. So he said, I'm coming out of my room, because he had his own office. And he said, I'm going to sit in the middle of all the teams and actually try to follow what they are doing. So that was so cool. Afterwards, he just let go. He said, okay, I have to do things differently. I have to set out a vision. And I have to take people along in this vision, but I don't actually have to look over their shoulder to see how they are doing their job, because actually they can do it better than I do. So that was a good moment for us. And another good moment, this was just for last week, and it's a big celebration for me. This is a photo of a stand-up meeting of our management team. So we have a management team of 8. And they were used to having these weekly meetings of 4 hours. And I was fighting for 2 years, like, okay, we have to have a daily stand-up. And now it's a transparent process where everybody can watch what the management team is talking about and what the direction is they are going. And they can look at the boards and they can see what's happening. So they can actually see that managers do work. Which was already said. That's great. That's a great benefit. And the most funny thing was management wasn't visible ever, because they were always in meetings. And now they come to the working space every day to have a daily stand-up, and people were like, the first time they did this, and everybody made pictures, so it was really funny. We were in the room, and everybody was crowded around it, like, what are they doing? So I had to actually explain to the management what a daily stand-up is, which is bad if you're a software development company. Okay, and we have this thing we call the blue room, where we say, okay, everything that's a vision, everything that's the path we are going, we're putting it up on the walls. We have to talk to people to tell them where they are going. They can't guess where we're going. We have to tell them and tell them again and make it visible. If you don't do this, autonomy is worth nothing. You're just tearless. So try to put a lot of effort in it. And this is also very nice. Google it. It's a manifesto for Agile HR development. It says, okay, treat your people totally different. Because if you're not trusting them, and there's been enough said about it, if you're not being transparent, then you can't reach anything. Then it's really just about being steerless. And then you say, okay, I tried to delegate, and they proved me wrong because they messed up. Yeah, well, you did that yourself if you don't treat them like you should. So people actually respect other things than managers think. This is a research done, and they said, okay, what do managers think that is important for workers? And it's totally different than what they actually found important if you ask the employees. So it's about autonomy, respect, responsibility. And it's not about career ladders or supervision or clear rules. So try to keep this in mind with everything you do. Are you in the black side or are you in the white side? The only thing in the middle is a decent salary. We also try to move feedback totally around because we were used to having these performance reviews where we said, okay, you're doing a super job, and the rest of the hour was about how he could improve. So it was kind of not valid, right? And fear induces people to hide, induces people to actually prevent those things from happening. So a lot of energy goes into not doing things. And that's what you want to change, right? You want to have compliments because they induce endorphins. And endorphins are good. It's like getting high for free. So who wouldn't want it? So we implemented there's different systems, but you can look into TrueQ and Embrace. And they are about feedback fun. You just have feedback on your mobile, and you can ask someone, how did you think my presentation went? And you get instant feedback, not delayed. And it's very easy to use. You can send compliments. You can have a lot of those endorphins working for you. And people start focusing on strengths, and they want to have more of those compliments. So they start seeking more of the right behavior, which is great. That's what you want. Also, teams need to change in collaboration. There's a lot of discussion about how to call teams because you have DevOps, and there are some people who say it should be Ops Dev because Ops is more important or something. And then about security, they said it's Ops Sec, because security comes at the start and in the middle and at the end or something. There are actually people tweeting about this. And if you ask the founder of the word DevOps, he said, okay, I just needed a shorter word than Agile System Administration because that was too long. There was no grand plan behind DevOps. It's about collaboration. So how can we have endless discussions about the priority of the words? Because that's not about collaboration. That's the opposite. Don't waste your energy. And learn to learn. We totally changed this around. We have Jira boards for learning events. And we said everything you want to do, every conference you want to go to, every training you want to follow, every app you want to develop in a different language than you're used to, just put it on the board. And we make it very visible that we're learning. And it's also work you are doing. So if you try to hide it, you won't really have time to work on anything. So we try to make it visible. And we have Academy started to make sure there are learning paths. We have workshops which are from developers for developers. We have hackathons. And we go, obviously, to conferences, but you're already in that place, so it's very good. Well, design for fast feedback and evolution. So the microservice architecture really helps us to be able to have the experimental approach. We have a lot of microservices, around 400 or something. And if something wasn't well, if our assumptions were wrong, we just kill the microservice and put a new one up with the right assumptions. And it's very critical that you have this, otherwise you have long discussions making it the right design. There's a lot of fear of putting wrong code into production. But you obviously will put wrong code into production, so accept it. And make sure it's not a bad thing to do. Make sure you can eliminate it very quickly. Also, the test pyramid, we tried to reinvent it because it was about how fast your tests were. Everybody aware with the normal test pyramid? Or is it something new? It says, okay, there are very fast running tests, and you have to have a lot of them. And there are very slow running tests, and you have to have very little of them, because your tests will be running too long. In my opinion, you should try to turn this around. You should have some tests sooner in your pipeline, because early feedback is cheaper. And further up in your pipeline, there's a lot of code coming together, and your pipeline is blocking the other code going to production. So you have to have early feedback on your code. And how do you do it? You can say, okay, there are some smoke tests which would threaten business continuity, so I'm going to do those very early. There is some code that's under development, so the chance that something's breaking over there is much bigger than code that was just sitting there, right? So you can have those tests put forward, and you have early feedback. And there are some code parts where you know they're just flaky, where you know that's the kind of code you don't want to touch. And that code can also be early tested because it breaks a lot, right? So just be smart about it. And it's not about the kind of test, but about the risk it's addressing. And there's a big layer of too expensive tests to run. A lot is in the UI, but there are also some other tests that are just too expensive. And try to move them to monitoring. Don't try to prevent every breaking change. Make sure you're able to react quickly. And if it's code that's never broken before, then maybe it's just fine to have it addressed in production through monitoring. Well, then this one. Branching is your new mother-in-law. Sometimes you have to go there, but you want to minimize it. Very important lesson, also for the code. How is that? Branching, obviously, is not integrating. So you're extending the moment where you're learning that your code is breaking things. And that's the thing we tried to quit doing. So don't branch. Well, as I said, sometimes you have to go there. If you have a big change in libs or something, well, obviously, you don't want to bother the rest of the team by not being able to develop. So that's a fine moment to branch. But I kind of developed this pyramid where it says, okay, try a lot to work on collaboration with your clients. If you have co-creation, pre-acceptance, if you actually talk to them, that will save you a lot of work in your testing pipelines because they can actually tell you things, they can talk. And then you can try to not have a front-end path. So if you have your back-end, you can just go to production, and as long as nobody can reach that part of the code, you can just put it in production. There's no problem. Even if it's breaking, there's no problem as long as you can't reach the code. So be smart about your release strategy. Then we have feature flags. Feature flags are, you have to add code to make sure you have a feature flag. So you don't want to do this all the time because it kind of gets messy in your code. And then lastly, you have branching. If the other tree won't work, then you go to branching. And we developed this release strategy where we said, okay, we have a lot of pipeline before this, but that's not the point. We have acceptance, where the team takes a look manually. Is this really what we wanted? Then we have rehearsal, and rehearsal is about obtaining a sustainable pace, because otherwise everybody's putting things into production, and we can't, well, it's not a sustainable pace for us, because we don't have any control, and sometimes we want to have a launch or something, and we don't have the choice over here. Features are isolated here for a day before they go into production. Then we have a canary production environment. We're looking into scaling up with another canary production environment, but it helps us to reduce the risk. So that's about impact reduction. If you have a canary production environment, then the risk, if you're breaking things, is much lesser because it's only going to, in our case, 1% of our clients. And lastly, we have feature flags, which is about shipping delay. So it helps us if there is a bunch of features and we want to have this big launch or something, then the only way to obtain this in the microservice landscape is by feature flagging it and then putting over the flags. That's the way to go into production then. Lesson number 8, customers actually don't want continuous delivery. That's very important. Because somehow the development team tends to talk a lot about it because it's a very interesting topic for us, right? But customers don't want it. And that's quite logical because it's about broken trust. This is a measurement on our code base, which is from 1.5 years ago, so things got worse. And we have 10 million lines of COBOL, almost. And we have 3 million lines of PHP. I don't know which one is scarier. We can take a vote on it later, but I mean, it's bad. And so we are measuring bugs per hour. And when you're doing that, you're not in a good place, right? I mean, it would be nice to measure bugs per month or something. So you have to take them along on the journey you're traveling into getting better code. So first improve, then accelerate. pull and not push. Make all these cool features and get to the point where the customers say, okay, I don't want to delay release anymore. Can you just give it because it's so interesting? And that's a nice point to be at. And explain your goal. Tell them where you are going. Although it's not valuable to them, you can explain and you can gain a lot by explaining. So wrapping it all up, continuous delivery makes it enabled to have rapid prototyping. Agile product development is needed for doing small experiments and seeking value to assert your assumptions. You have to have a learning organization to be able to learn actually from your experiments. Then you need Agile HR to support people to learn agility and to improve on their capabilities. You have to have autonomous teams to empower the teams to decide by themselves and to not have a manager who has to oversee everything. And you have to have microservices to enable an evolutionary architecture. And then there's the last lesson, number 9, be ready for surprises. Because the line of success is not a straight line up. It will get you down, it will sometimes drain all your energy, but just get up and hang in there because it's worth your while. So that's me. Thank you.